We have currently all board members are present along with interim superintendent Frank Norton. And we'll start now with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, workshop is here just to discuss things, get information. We have 3 things on the agenda. Mr. Norton, do you have anything else?
Do not have anything to add.
Board member want to do anything else? Okay. We'll begin with Mr. Merle Waters from Wells Fargo, am I right? Yeah.
Correct.
Well, we have a number of things, so we'll give.
I left the office.
You have about 20 minutes with questions, sir? Be great, so. And Ms. Paradis is joining you too.
Yeah, I'm gonna present his slides for him.
Okay. We have all the information in front of us, I see.
Yes, yeah, the same packet, same exact packet.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing
You
has
didn't throw an
changed.
extra million or 2 in there for us?
No. So we start on slide 4. So just some very high level summary information. Actually, nothing has changed here either, but just very briefly, the date of the trust again. So the OPEB legislation or statute 356A that governs the OPEB trust, that goes back basically right about the time of the financial crisis, if you recall that. So when this trust was, or the date of the trust, or the actual document is in September of 2009. It's an irrevocable trust. We work with 12 districts in the state. 8 are irrevocable trusts, 4 are revocable trusts. And with irrevocable, that simply just means that you've irrevocably given those funds to the trust that can't be pulled back out of the trust. Referenced Minnesota statute 356A. Again, that's the law, the state law that governs how OPEB trusts can be or should be managed. So it really kind of lays out the rules, if you will. The big difference that 356A allowed from what you had previously. So under statute 118A, you were limited to investing in government securities. So treasury securities or agency securities. And if you think back to that point in time when interest rates were virtually zero, very, very low yielding. And in essence, it was a mismatch between assets and liabilities because you were investing in short-term 1%, 0.5% yielding securities, and you were trying to match obligations that basically were like pension obligations. So you think about inflation rates in healthcare, for example. So 356A allows you to invest in equities, actually private equity, venture capital, those types of things. We don't have any of that in the portfolio, but that is what it would allow you to do. The most recent actuarial report, June of 2022, I believe it'd be every 2 years. You'll be working on that.
Due this year for a full study.
Right. So the
23, 24.
okay, the obligation at that time, 4.6 million that you can see there. And then I'm jumping ahead just a little bit, but to let you know, the current market value of the trust stands at about 8.6 million through the close of trading yesterday. So very well funded at this point. And then again, the investment objective there, we reference that in our industry as moderate growth and income. That just means really a balance between growth and income, or a balance between equities and fixed income or bonds, income generating investments. And again, the portfolio life here, greater than 10 years. Again, that's more industry speak, if you will, but this is a very, very long-term trust, years and years into the future. So that's why we have that equity exposure in here. Questions on any of those high level items? Okay. Let's jump over to page 6. And there's a column at the bottom, in that box at the bottom. There's a column titled Target Allocation. And you'll see a 46%, a 48%, and a 6%. And those percentages just tie back to a document that we call an investment policy statement. So every district has an investment policy statement specific to the OPEB trust. And that's the document that sets the targets that we have for these various asset classes. And that's all based on return projections, risk expectations for risk. What type of return are we trying to get for the portfolio? So this is very much a middle of the road, if you will, from least aggressive to most aggressive. So again, that moderate growth and income focus. So those are the targets that you see there. We're a little bit overweight in a category called real assets and just a touch underweight in equities. And so when you combine those two together, or if you think of it this way, within the fixed income category there with a target of 46, we're basically right in line with that. So we want to have our fixed income allocation there. The other two add up to the opposite, to the other two pieces there. Real assets, what that actually is there are two private real estate funds. So you do actually own commercial real estate in the portfolio, and they are private funds. So they're not publicly traded. About 2/3 of each of those funds are invested in multifamily housing. So when you think of commercial real estate, and you hear a lot being talked about today with commercial real estate, and that's the next shoe to fall with, the banking issues that you're seeing out there. But in this particular case, again, it's multifamily housing. So think apartment complexes, those types of things. The demand for single family residential housing in the United States is still about 5 million units short. So our concern, not that we're not concerned, but we have very minimal concerns about these funds because of the exposure that they have. So when you maybe be reading through this later or hear talk about commercial real estate, it's not office properties that you hear so much about today because of the work from home trends. So I just wanted to make sure I touched on that. So any questions on allocations? This has changed a number of times over the years. Yeah.
Who manages those funds?
I'm sorry, I could have actually mentioned that from the outset. So I'm actually the portfolio manager, the investment person that manages it. But it's not, it's not the Merle Waters approach to this. I'm part of a team. There are about 100 of us across the United States, probably another 200 to 300 in the research side of things. And so my guidance comes from them in terms of setting these allocation targets. Points in time, we will be overweight or underweight those targets, but it's my responsibility specifically to manage it. So.
And it's probably not worth saying, but I'm assuming that because this is public money, we're low risk, right? We're
Yes.
investing in low risk.
Yeah, and again, I would say if you think of it from least aggressive to most aggressive, you literally are right in the middle of that. And so it's very common, especially with pensions. I would say this, actually with pensions, you would tend to see more like 60 to 65% equities and less in fixed income than what you have. So yeah, I would say you're not low risk, but you're certainly at a reasonable level of risk for the type of trust that this is, yes.
And all the equities we invest in are highly rated by Standard & Poor, and we're not, it's not junk bonds or anything like that.
Yeah, that's one of the other things with the statute, Minnesota Statute 356A that's there, is that you are allowed to invest up to 5% of the total trust value in high yield fixed income. We have none at this point. So you are allowed to do that, but all of the other fixed income exposure by statute is required to be what they call investment grade. So you see a lot of treasury securities, so government securities in there, very high quality corporate bonds in there as well. So.
Thank you.
Oh, good question.
I feel like I'm
Yes.
behind you.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No. How long have we invested with Wells Fargo?
This goes back, so let's jump ahead just a bit. It's a very good question. So if we go to page 15, pages 15 and 16, page 15. So from the very beginning, actually. So the funding of the trust, and where you see this, so the upper, there's the title at the top of the page anyway. You'll see a report period of 1/1/10, so January 1 of 2010. Page 15 again.
Report period, way in the top.
Yeah, way in the top.
Sorry, we're on page. Okay.
And another place we could actually see this, maybe better, page 14, so just prior to that. So 14 is, so that shows all of these, so that shows the original funding back in October of 2009. And then every distribution that the trust has paid out over time as well. So, but from the very beginning, yes. It was a very uncomfortable time in 2008 and early 2009 to think about investing in equities with a stock market that declined close to 55% in 08. But it was the right thing to do. Again, it's matching long-term assets with long-term liabilities as the approach there. Okay. Other questions? I was going to jump back, if we could, one more time. I wanted to spend just a moment on, bear with me. Let's do page 9. And this, a lot of detail here. And again, we have it's the third column from the right-hand side. Again, the target allocation column. So the first page that we looked at that had the target allocation showed just the percent for stock, for equities, percent for fixed income. This is giving the breakdown now even further of that. So within equities, and this is what I wanted to spend just a moment on. So that equity category or section that you see, you'll see some parentheses around numbers, so negative numbers, if you will. All that's meaning is underweight, under what the target is. So where you see the 245, negative 245,000, that's just, we're underweight equities just a bit. But if you drop down, you see the negative around 163,000, and then the negative around 147,000. So we are underweight today, if you will, versus the targets. Small cap equities and emerging market equities. And so going back to your question on who manages it, that's part of my role based again on our research group that we have to overweight or underweight, not just equities, but also within equities, the composition of that. And we just recently, within the last couple of weeks, changed. So if you were to be looking at activity in the portfolio, you'd see some activity now. We had previously been significantly overweight US and very much underweight non-US. So think Europe, Australia, and Japan pops in there, but principally Europe really because of what was going on with Russia and Ukraine and our feelings about significant recession there just because of the energy shock and the supply chain issues that they were going to have. Well, they ended up having a very mild winter. Natural gas is 50 to 60% lower than what it was even before the war started. So we just don't see the recession there like we thought. And stock valuations there are actually very attractive relative to the US. So we've actually done a shift there. So again, you'll see some activity in there. But that's, if we were having this meeting, actually the last time I was here, you would have seen for developed market equities. So the number right below emerging markets there, where it shows now a positive 72,616. That was probably negative 250,000 last time, maybe 300,000. So it's not just a model that this is put in. We are making adjustments based upon our outlook for things.
And you talked about that last time.
And is last time like every year? You come every year? Every 2 years?
Been doing
Twice a year?
quarter, a couple times a year. So then maybe the last quick point, and then I'll leave it for questions. So I'm going to jump back to page 15 again. Performance 15, and this is performance through the end of April. We just measure it every month. And I'll start with the far right-hand column in the lower right corner. Again, a lot of numbers. It's titled Since Inception. And you'll see a 4.08%. So that's the rate of return, and it's an annualized number, so 4% per year, going back to January of 2010. For the trust, the target that we have here is really closer to 5. Of course, last year took a bit off of that. With the declines in equities that we had, but 5% is what we're after. You might say, gosh, that doesn't sound like much given the stock market has done so well. Well, the bond market, which again is about 45% of your trust, had done nothing for 10, 11, 12, 13 years when interest rates were close to zero. So the equity portion was really where all of your return came from, which really kind of cut that back. Now it made perfect sense to continue to have that fixed income because again, it's public money. We want to be very conservative with how we're managing it. So even when rates were low, we wanted to have that larger allocation to fixed income. What happened in 2022, if you think of a teeter-totter, that's the relationship between interest rates and bond prices. And with the Fed raising rates 5 percentage points last year, 4.75 actually last year, bond prices were hit. So 22, again, was a tough year for equities and fixed income, actually. So the bond returns even were pretty tough last year. So 5% is what we're aiming for. Again, it doesn't sound like a big number, but again, we're not trying to hit a home run here. We're aiming for a number that based upon early on the actuarial studies was a target rate of return that would make this trust be very successful over time. And now you find yourselves in an even better position being so fully funded. But it still makes sense to be pretty conservative with how we're managing it. So I will stop there for questions, comments. Make sure I get everybody in here.
What do you see as, you talk about the Fed raised it 4.25 on the prime, whatever, and obviously rates are going up. So where do you see the rest of calendar year 2023?
Well, that is the debate. You mean in terms of interest rates
As to
or just market?
the market, the whole, you talk about Ukraine, you talk about, we're gonna go into an election year next year, we're gonna go,
Yeah.
OPEC is talking about cutting back on the oil and inflation. Is that, where do you see your big team must
Yeah.
be diving into that, scratching and trying to figure that answer out?
Yeah. So maybe the way to answer that is and every firm has to go through this, which is really in some ways kind of a silly exercise because you're throwing a dart at a point in time. But for the year-end price target that we have for the US market, so think of the S&P 500, we have at 4,100, a level of 4,100, and that's basically where we are today. We're a little bit above that actually. So our view is for the balance of the year, sideways, and we've really been going sideways. If you graph the US market, you can go back 2 years and we've went sideways for 2 years with this big move up and a big move down and then a move back up again. Our view is that's what we continue to do for the rest of the year. A lot of issues to deal with. The inflation issue seems to be it's under control better than it was, yet the Fed, we think, raises rates one more time yet this year, and that they will not be lowering rates this year, which a lot of market participants think the Fed will be lowering rates later this year, which is one reason the stock market has responded this year the way it has. It's a pretty challenging time, yet the equity market just keeps grinding ahead a bit. So we see a sideways market this year, some volatility. If we end the year at 4,100, our thinking is that we probably go back down to 3,800 or 3,700 and back up to 4,100 before we get to the end of the year. We've got the debt ceiling to get through. We've got the inflation issue. I think if the Fed does hike rates one more time, that's probably viewed negatively by the market, probably catches the market off guard, the market being equities. So we could see a sell-off there. Our year-end price target for next year, we've got that out there already for 2024. We're at 4,700, which is about 13 percentage points higher. So we think that once we get through this next 4 to 5 to 6 months, stock market is always 12 months forward looking. If you think about it, stock market peaked in January of 22, and then look what happened following that. The economy started rolling off, and so the market will start anticipating the recovery of the economy at some point. And again, we're pretty optimistic for next year for growth to return. So a lot to get through before we get to that point.
So much and it can change. Yes.
Would you mind, just for people who are watching, just kind of give an overview, small synopsis of what OPEB is, what we're talking about here?
I may defer to you on that some as well.
We can do that.
Yeah.
So OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. This is a trust that is there to fund our liability to staff who have or will be retiring from the district. Contract benefits that run out for years to come.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I know this is a lot to take in
It
for
is.
those of us who are not financially, in that arena. So I think it's a lot, but it's a very important trust to be able to manage well, because we do have a lot of retirees and we want to make sure that their benefits stay fully flush.
And it's mainly for the healthcare.
Yes.
Contractual.
Yeah.
Years ago. And money is not put in annually.
Nope.
It's basically money sitting there and gaining or losing depending upon the market. And then it's paid out at the time for the benefits of those that are there. And now that's changing to a degree too, as people get off the, 2008 or 9 it was when we changed the retirement healthcare benefit
Mhm.
for people that started after that, so it's a moving target.
That's a very good point to mention that at the outset, this was just a one-time funding into the trust. Every 2 years, then there's an actuarial study, so you use
Hildy.
Hildy, yes. They'll do an actuarial study, which just takes a look at the population or the number of individuals still in the plan are still covered, what the obligations may look like in the future, costs, those types of things. And then that's where they establish that OPEB obligation that you see there. So that can move. That can be a bit of a moving target, which is why we really set our rate of return more around 5%. That seemed to be when you did planning based on that back then, that was the rate of return that worked very well for the trust. We have, at the outset of the trust, we had a incredibly conservative allocation. You can imagine with coming out of 2008, again, the financial crisis, we took a year to get just up to 40% in equity. So we just incrementally eased our way into the market. We held about 10% of the trust literally in cash, because even at that time, the bond market was even very dysfunctional. And so there was concern about having even access, not being able to sell bonds, for example. So we had an incredibly conservative allocation at the outset. Of course, in hindsight, you always look back and say, gosh, we should have put it all in the equity market. That's not prudent. I'm not suggesting it, but that always pops into your mind when you see that.
Any other questions for Mr. Waters? Well, thank you very much for coming down here and joining us tonight.
Absolutely.
And for the information. I think we all learned something from it, and that's great.
Super.
Yes.
And thank you for your time. Thank you for the relationship that goes back a number of years. So I've been working from day one with the district, and I very much enjoyed it. So thank you.
Let's hope the market does as you
Oh, gosh,
suggested. Or better.
I would be thrilled with just being right here at the end of the year. That's considering what we were expecting. So
Thank you.
that would be great.
Thank you, Ms. Barris.
Thank you.
Policy Review 200 Series, Mr. Norton. It's got that.
Yeah, so there's 4 policies. We continue to review them as they come up. So we started, if you recall, with the 100s, we're in the 200s. They're reviewed annually just to make sure that you're aware, and that any modifications that you may like to make on them, we can make them before they are passed. If there is any modifications that need. So at the workshop level today, basically, these are just for your review. I can go through them. 208 is our first one, the development, adoption, and implementation of policies. So it's a policy on how we implement policy. So it really just, it speaks to basically how this process works. So Yep, I bring them through, basically, you through the policy, talk about the policy. This particular one is about that, 208, adoption of the policy. So this is just the workshop. So are there any questions on 208 at this time?
Questions? Ms. Rowe?
How'd you know?
To give it a look, side look, okay.
Well, it kind of came up in my mind this past week, when we were discussing, like different schools are implementing things differently, and at what point is it a district policy, or does this, say, for instance, the high school wants to change their hours for the last week of school. Is that something that comes before the board, or is that something that stays within the school? Like, for me, it feels a little bit disjointed on where the policies per school versus per district come in, or per, like, who decides?
Well, you could make policy on anything you wanted to make policy on. So there's policies and there's procedures, and within each building, there's a procedure. And because the high school doesn't operate like the middle school, doesn't operate like the elementary school, you'd be managing a lot within that. But if there was something that you wanted policy, you can certainly bring that up and make it policy. So right now, there isn't anything that governs those things. There's nothing within contract language within the unions, any of the unions, that talks about start-stop times or finals week or anything like that, for example. But if you wanted to talk about policy, to be able to have something like that, you can always talk about a policy that you'd like to be able to be implemented. It's just not policy now. So if you wanted to have it investigated, I'd like you to investigate a policy that talks about A, B, C. And then I would go and research that. I would talk to MEA about it. I would talk to a number of different, attorney about that. Try to get examples from the area schools and around and put something together, just like we did with our service animals at that particular time. Because we didn't have one. We wanted one. Doesn't seem like it'd be a governance thing, but it impacted so many people. It seemed like more of a procedure, but it's a policy now, so we can look into that. That help?
That does, yes. And I think I'm even at a higher helicopter, like 30,000 feet view up there. And I'll give you the example, there are some students who opted out of the MCAs, right? And they've been told that because they didn't take the MCAs, now they have to take a final.
Didn't I tell you guys that? That's what my kids were telling me. I said that a couple weeks ago.
So to me, where does that lie in the policy realm? Is that a district policy? Is that a high school policy? Who sets that policy? Who is in charge of making sure the procedures are followed? Because it feels like procedures weren't followed because it wasn't communicated to parents. It feels like the kids now they're the ones that have to answer for maybe a decision they had nothing to do with. Kids aren't always the ones in charge of making those decisions.
Right. So in the high school setting, I'll give you that exact example. Final schedules in many different districts are up to that building. So the administration gets together with actually the lead team from each discipline, basically. They would have the science department, they'd have the counseling department, they'd have the math department, and that's that lead team within the building. So the administration gets together and says, what do we want finals to look like? We're coming out of COVID. What do we want finals to look like in this particular, in the building now? Say, well, we want it to look like it looked like before. We'd like it to, and I got that on my administrative report. So what do we want finals to look like? And they say, this is what we want it to look like. Well, how can we get more kids? And this is just discussion with within that team. How can we get more kids to participate? The boards at one particular time said that this is the number of kids that participate, the number's going down. Why even have MEA testing, or MCA testing, I'm sorry, if students aren't gonna participate? How can we get them? They brainstormed that way to be able to get them to be able to participate. And that's basically what they came up with. There's two options to be able to demonstrate proficiency. You can demonstrate proficiency by taking the MCA and showing that proficiency, or you can demonstrate proficiency by taking the final and demonstrating it there, or you can demonstrate proficiency by both. So it's just options, basically. If you didn't want to take the MCA because you didn't want to take it, then you demonstrated proficiency by taking the final. If you took the MCA and you demonstrated proficiency, then you don't need to take the final. You've already demonstrated proficiency in that area.
But you don't get your MCA results. That teacher has no idea how that student did on those tests or not.
Actually, they do. We don't get them.
Before the end of the year.
Yes, we don't get them as a district because they're locked. The students, the administrators who give that know that whether they were proficient or not.
By when?
They know already. So the proficiency, because it's computerized basically, we know. And we know the increase and we have the data as to how many people, basically the increase in the number of students, but it's not released at this particular point. So for them to say, well, did I pass it or didn't I pass it? They already know that, so before the finals, so the finals are next week. You have to remember also that it's particular grade level. So For example, 10th grade, they take the reading test, I believe, and 11th grade takes the math. They take all of the rest of the finals. It's just standardized testing. The MCAs are standards-based, and our curriculum is standards-based. So the final basically is based off of the standard because that's what our curriculum is based off of, the state standards. So it's actually giving them 2 opportunities to demonstrate performance on that. They take the MCAs and they're out. But let's say somebody took the MCAs and they passed it, but they had an A and they want an A+, they can still go in and take the final, even if they pass, were proficient on the MCAs. It's just a different way of thinking. I saw some of the data as far as people that took the test, and the percentage of students that actually took the test, and then where we are as far as proficiency, basically. I think you're gonna be surprised.
I got her first over here, just be honest. Didn't you?
So I don't have high school children anymore. So when you say don't take finals, you're just talking about in their language arts in 10th grade and in their math class in 11th grade. You're
Correct.
not talking about the rest of their classes,
Right,
just for those 2,
they'll take 6 finals, but not math.
not math, okay.
They'll take,
Or
and
6
if they're in a
finals
different
and
grade
5
level,
language arts,
correct.
okay.
Taking all of the other finals, they'll be here for all of the other finals. They've just already demonstrated proficiency on that one that they took on the MCAs.
And then how is that communicated to parents?
Mr. Nemenich is the one who's communicating that out to parents.
Okay.
It's not.
Okay. As somebody who went through the system and you're trying to get me to take a test and you're gonna threaten me with 2 tests, I'm not gonna wanna do either one of them. There's a reason why I'm not doing tests. Okay, there's a reason why I opted out my kid out of test. And with the advice of elementary school teachers throughout her whole thing. And then so when she heard this, it was like a car crash. Oh my gosh, I'm this far already and now what am I gonna do? There's a reason why people don't take tests, is because it's test anxiety. I have it. As a 43-year-old woman, if you're gonna tell me to take a test, I'm automatically gonna start sweating and panicking because I know you're trying to trick me. And with historical trauma, do you know what you're doing? You're trying, the government literally words things to trick us out of our land. So I just don't know how if we're gonna brainstorm to get to the children and the families to wanna start doing these tests. I don't think threatening them with another test I don't even know what's going on. And so when I hear it from my kids and then hearing it from other students and parents now too, so I don't know, who was telling these students this? Me as a parent, I think that should have been communicated with me first instead of telling my kids, so that way I can prepare them in case, and so they're not panicking. My students are panicking and they probably had no reason to if their mom or, someone that they trust explain things maybe a little bit differently to them. So I'm just saying, there's a reason why kids don't take tests, and we just need to think critically on things different.
Right, the finals were always there. We're gonna have finals, and if kids didn't take the final, then they would have to talk to their teacher and say, test anxiety, is there a place we can have you take that final? The final is just what's always been there. Red Wing has had that final, from my understanding, forever, basically, with the exception of the COVID years. So this was just added on as, instead of taking the final, we're gonna give you another opportunity, a different test. You take that test, you don't have to take that one. If you don't take the MCAs, you still have to take the final. The final is the final. Everyone takes the final. This is an opportunity for you not to have to do that. That's all it was. Yes.
Ms. Rowe.
Well, I think the reason I brought this up as an example of in policy is because it feels like whatever policy or procedure was discussed and decided upon within that administrative team at the high school or whomever was around the table and made this change, there are some procedures that didn't get done correctly. And so that brought to my feeling and intention, where's the line between what a school decides they're gonna do and a board or district decides the district is gonna do? Because to me, this feels not inclusive. It doesn't feel like it's something that is equitable. And I think we've put our families, you know, and I opted my child out too I have 3 children, but 2 of them took all the MCAs. But there's a very real reason why, as a family, we chose to make this decision. We didn't have all the information to make that decision. And that's a problem that we are facing as a district then. And is it a district issue or is it a high school issue? So that's my question on why I brought this up as an example of the policy development, adoption, and implementation. Because I think there's a problem here that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. And the students now who have to take a final, 1 or 2 in a class, maybe 3, they're feeling kind of punished because they didn't know. This was not anything that I was able to communicate to my child either. Other families are feeling the same way. And now as a district, you know, it just wasn't, the right procedures weren't followed. So that's why I want to talk about where's the policy implementation and the development, where's that line? I think it's a good question to ask.
Mr. Norton can answer and then we'll go over that. You want to answer it all?
Sure. Within the high school setting, basically, there's the process for which they give exams is a high school decision. And your governance basically is up here to say there will be a final. You could policy that, but the implementation process, what we're arguing here basically, or what we're discussing here is a breakdown in the communication chain, which is not a policy. It's a procedural thing within that. So if there was a breakdown within that, that's communication. There's no policy really on how to communicate about that. That's, the governance portion would be up here. And you could say you could write a policy on finals. The communication piece is actually the piece that was missing. And I see that, and we're aware of that. Because it was communicated out directly to the students in the class in which they're gonna take that final. So you have a final in this particular class, you can take the final, or you can take the MCA if you wish. It was just communicated out in those classes. Not in specials, not in music, not in art, just that one class. So that, I guess, Pam, an answer to your question, Director Roll, is that governance basically is up here, and you could say that we would like to have a policy on finals, but then it's really just a breakdown of communication, and you wouldn't have a policy on unnecessarily on communication. Yes.
So
Sorry.
maybe,
I have over here.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Schultz.
Well, I was really just gonna echo kind of this whole discussion because I think, people are upset by this. I didn't see any communication. So when you say George communicated that, I'm not sure who he communicated that to for parents. And I think the decision was not well thought out. I think it was done very quickly, very rashly. I mean, the teachers have communicated that like rolled out instantly one morning and instantly to staff students. And then obviously there wasn't time for parents to be brought into it. So I have the exact same concerns as Pam, and I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that.
Ms. Bjornson.
well, and I think too, so clearly we didn't handle this well and we want the community to trust us. So I feel like too, we made a mistake. We need to own the mistake and, promise to do better. Because I think too, with MCAs, I believe even if your child is or old enough, high school kids, it still has to be a parent opt-out, right? So if it's a parent opt-out and the rules have changed, it seems like it should be communicated to the parents and not the kids. And that's a mistake that we have made that I think we need to own.
That was an excellent catch, Pam. Real spot on about how like that is one particular area, probably amongst many, that even if it is a high school, I think that has to be a district because you're getting the children, we did it in elementary school. So my argument for my child was, oh, great, well, I would have loved the opportunity to get set and, you know, she's in high school, she's skipped out and since elementary, middle, that's a long time, and then now she has to get into the form of knowing how to test again, and I think that is almost probably worse than like forcing them into a change. So the communication, I would say, does not stay in just high school because it affects them their entire education career. Because like I said, I don't know when we opted out in elementary, so my kids is like, you know, so communication does have to go with elementary too, and middle.
Oh, for sure. They have third grade testing. I mean, it does come up for that. Basically, it seems like the concern basically at this one, because there is no lower level finals. There's no finals at any of the other grade levels. This was just this particular, at 8th, 10th, and 11th grade. Those are the people that take a final. And so it was offered the opportunity not to have to take that final if you took the MCA.
I'll just jump in here if I could. Great discussion, great points. Let me see if I'm understanding it correctly. There are finals in the final week, I think, at some point. But the MCAs, you can opt out. The decision was made without letting people know, if you opted out, you'll take a final. I don't think that's correct. I don't think we should be now all of a sudden saying that should have been done some time ago, communicated to everybody and to the school board by bringing forward to the school board. This is what we're proposing to do, so you're aware. The school board is the governing body of the building, of the school. And we were blindsided by that email we got the other day. I was. That shouldn't happen. Because if there's some people that don't think the school board's a governing body, they need to come to us and tell us why they don't think they are, because we are. And I certainly hope people respect that. So, we have to fix it. Ms. Bjornstead said it very well. We have to own a mistake. We made a mistake, we as a group. This was a decision made by a group of people in the high school area that we were not aware of the decision. I don't know if anybody else was. And was it done last year like this? Or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago? I don't think so. I don't know. But, so we need to fix something that happened. And throw it back onto you as to get that taken care of. So am I right in this?
Yes, yep. So I'll need to do better. So we'll fix that, the communication portion of it, make sure that there's a complete understanding as to what it is gonna be happening. And then I'd like to pause just for a second, because I know that having new information or not hearing information. I'd like to pause for a second, and once you get those results, then revisit that without dismissing it out of hand.
Of results.
Results of the test in the spring. So the reason I bring this up, just for you to think about. One of the times that we talked about this, the last time we talked about the MCAs, was the discrepancy of numbers, and that were they actual? I think I just talked about this. Were they actual numbers? But you can't do anything with data unless you have a complete set of data. So the interest, I want you to view it a little bit in what was trying to accomplish and fumbled. What we were trying to accomplish, what the high school was trying to accomplish basically, was to gain data so that we could make, the high school and the district could make equitable decisions as to how we're going to change the data. If the numbers indicated that there was a discrepancy between races, for example, and how do we fix that? Well, we need a data set that's actual. So the intent was there, the communication was fumbled, we'll do better, basically in the future. But I want you to really, when you get that data, see the difference in what everybody looking at and trying on that MCA, as opposed to just having the MCA opting out and saying it's useless.
Let me just jump in real quick.
Okay.
The MCAs are either going away or they're not taking care, not a lot of people are doing them statewide. We have it based upon everybody in the school, because if you don't take the test, it's a 0. So we had it done by Dr. Wagner here, gave us a report as to the people that did the test. This is the percentage of people where they fell within the state guidelines. And this is the whole group, this is where they fell. So, yeah, I think the real problem I think we have is those that are now have to be surprised by having to take a final, we have to correct that. Not just the communication part. How we correct that, we need to know that coming forward. Ms. Bjornsted,
Well,
Mr.
and yes, Frank, I was going to ask too, was it an effective way to increase participation? And if it was an effective way, then we have to figure out how to make it equitable so that students understand this is something that we value. And then we figure out how to make, create a situation where students who have opted out multiple years feel comfortable jumping in at this point. So, anyway,
Do you have any questions?
so I appreciate what you said about, we gotta get the data.
Go ahead.
Did it work?
I was just gonna say basically what Trudy said. I appreciate that this was looked at for that reason, and I am curious to know, did it entice kids to take the MCA, and do we have a more representative sample now that have taken the test that looks more like our district? And if that's the case, then I don't think this is something that should just be thrown out. The issue really was the communication, and that parents didn't know that this was happening, and so then it made it more difficult for kids to be put in that situation.
Yes, Ms. Ossendorf.
So I can see the potential benefit if you have, if you're telling students that if you prove proficiency on this test, you won't have to take this other test, and improving like how well kids or to what extent kids apply themselves to taking the test. But I don't see, let's see the numbers, but I don't see how it could have been an effective means to get people to take the test if people didn't know in advance. If I, as a parent, didn't know that these were the consequences of opting my child out, it would not change whether or not I opted my child out. So in terms of like how the students who took the tests did, whether they applied themselves or not, whether they took it seriously or not, I can see the benefit of that. But if we didn't communicate it to the parents, who are the ones who are filing that opt out or not, then I don't see how it would have been effective in that sense. Again, that communication thing is a big issue. And I think, we've seen this in other things too, where sometimes things are kind of like, oh, we're just gonna do this real quick. We're gonna change how things are in the program of studies, and it needs to be approved at this meeting. And that is incredibly frustrating to me. It's incredibly frustrating to me as a board member, and I think it's incredibly frustrating for our parents and our community to feel like they're surprised. Nobody likes surprises in these instances. So I don't know, like to Pam's point of like, what policy does the board need to implement? I don't know how we could, how you would word such a policy, but I think as a practice, we need to find a way to be cognizant of when we're making large changes or changes that will affect a large number of people, that we're doing them in a timely manner so that the information can get out. Not even just like, were parents notified, but were parents notified more than a day in advance or 2 days in advance or whatever the case may be, like when things are changing, obviously there's always, emergency things that need to happen, quickly, but I think a lot of these instances that have been really frustrating were not emergency situations. And that is frustrating. And I think that's also frustrating to the parents and the community too, that they feel blindsided by something that shouldn't be a blindside, right? Like we were all blindsided by COVID and suddenly like our kids are going back to school, but it was a global pandemic. right? Things happened, or, you know, when there was a fire in the cafeteria, school's closed tomorrow, right? Like, we understand those level of emergencies and having to make quick responses. But this doesn't seem like something that should have been that level of quick action plus lack of communication. So I think that's the issue for me, as well as
Ms.
the
Roll,
MCAs, which are a whole other kettle of fish.
Ms. Roll, go ahead, you had your hand up. Thank you.
I think Anna pretty much summed up. And again, I'll just go back to, there are very real reasons why a family would choose to opt their child out. And I think we have to look at this from an equity lens as well. Not all kids are, have the same learning techniques or styles or needs or families, and I understand the need to have some incentives, I get that. But the people who are truly wanting to opt their child out, there's some real reasons why. We don't need to go into all that, but mental health, physical health, just to name two, but you know, there's real reasons. And so I think we have to take a longer look at the reasoning behind that. I'm all for incentivizing, however, not putting those families and students in a position of making things worse by making a decision to opt out. So I'll be done talking about it.
Ms. Wagner.
I'm just gonna add some pieces in. The backstory for MCA testing and incentivizing is that you cannot incentivize by performance. So what that means is that a student can't be given an incentive based on how they perform on MCAs. They can be given an incentive for taking a test. So that's a larger conversation with how this all kind of digressed a little bit within the district as well, which is very concerning. It is a violation of testing policy. It was not at the level that I would have approved. So I just want to put that in the space. I think also when we're thinking about your original question with changing finals week with the schedule, you can look at 602, policy 602-4C, which does say the board can approve or disapprove whether or not the day is created differently. So that's just my piece in this space. I think that there is a lot of work we need to do for communication, a significant amount of transparency with our community and with our parents first to understand what the options are. So we absolutely have to do 120% better. So that, just after listening to all of you, I want to know that this was brought to a leadership level. I did not approve this. Rather, it was approved at a different level and executed. So I have big concerns with incentivizing performance, and here's why. Back to the equity. There are some students who will not meet or exceed. There are some students who are going to present a 504 or special ed need that we need to take into consideration that will not ever hit that mark where they would be able to take an exemption from the final. So that is, for me, just a component piece that we have to talk through, and we are talking through at the level it's done at this point. While we'll probably get some really great results, I have concerns across the board with its implementation. So just other things to think about with testing procedures.
I think decisions like this is, things like this should come before the board, so we're not blindsided by an email by somebody that we didn't know anything about as board members. So, we need to work better on that too, besides communicating with our parents. We need to communicate as a leadership team, with the board. Yes.
Well, and I also, in my former life as a teacher, I understand part of the reason why we take these tests. One is to measure student achievement, but it's also to measure the effectiveness of our curriculum. And we've come out of this pandemic and kids are significantly behind, and we need to know, okay, in all these groups, it's not working for anybody. So what do we need to do differently for kids? But this situation is a little uncomfortable, a lot uncomfortable.
That's how we grow.
That's right, we're growing today.
So where do we go from here? We talked about it. Go ahead, Mr. Martin. You want to say something?
No, I was just I could address maybe what Anna was talking about is, because we don't have the data, actually have the data as to how many people did either opt in or opt out. At one particular, I think it was just last year, where 40% of one particular grade level opted out, and this year 8 kids did. So the performance basically will have a really good picture of what we're talking about here, is that when we have the data, what are we doing with that data? And now we have the opportunity to correct all of the mistakes that were made in the past and come up with something different. But to get the data at this particular point in time, even with the mistakes that were made, and Dr. Wagner is correct. You make mistakes and then you say, okay, this is what we're gonna do differently in the future. But let's capitalize basically on the data that we have and then say, how can we replicate that and get that data within these boundaries? So that's just the next step, basically, to be able to do that. And finals generally, like I started this whole conversation with, was finals are generally done within the classroom. So if you made a policy on it, you're gonna be saying that finals will be given to. Now you're taking away whether a teacher believes that a final could be a written summary or a 5-page paper, or it could be multiple guess, multiple choice. That's what my teachers used to call it. But anyway, so you have to be careful as to the governance versus management within the building. The teachers have to have that opportunity to be able to say, this class, I know from some of the summatives I've had in the past, they have it. I could give this type of final, and then I could collect the information that I need. So there is that inside there. Is just going back to pre-pandemic, was there were finals within the classroom. Teachers know what they're going to be giving for those finals and that in those areas. Just at these particular grade levels, 10 and 11, those are the finals that we're talking about that are impacting kids.
So I guess my question going forward is, if you don't think a policy is necessary, how do we ensure that for example, this specific issue and decision-making gets to a high level approval and, it doesn't happen again? Because I guess that's where I'm feeling a little bit like, okay, we don't want to start making policies, but at the same time, you weren't consulted as high-level leadership so I don't know how you move forward.
It's likely procedural. We also don't have a full-time district assessment coordinator, which would be a nice step in the right direction to be able to kind of keep management so that we do have an E20 look. So we're looking at our elementary components, because opt-outs are for everyone who is asked to take a high stakes assessment, right? So that's one step in the right direction. I do think it's clarity on, chain of command. With making decisions about high stakes assessments too, that we trust our building level leadership, but we also want to be informed, right? So that's from parents to leaders and ongoing. So that could be something procedural that we put into place and then just really implement with fidelity. So I think there's a couple of steps and conversations that need to happen, because it's not just limited to MCA testing. We need to communicate better across the board in the district.
Sorry, go ahead, Chair. Dr. Ryder and I have had, conversations about systems, and I don't know whether they went away during COVID, but we both recognize that there are things that need to be put into place. There are things with your frustration as to where are those systems and where is that? With that background now, of me being in high school and having been here, we're very much aware, but we're also very much from the outside kind of coming in and saying, this is what needs to happen going forward. So this is just one event that Dr. Maria was talking about. There are many, but that's what happens in the district. Again, there was a breakdown. We had COVID, like the chair was talking about. Things maybe got out of line, put them back into line again and move forward. District's moving forward in a lot of things. Systems, communication is our next basically big step.
Okay, we're having a pretty good, which is good. We needed to have a good candid discussion about that.
So I can move on to 209.
Thank you.
Code of ethics is in here. This talks a little bit about, kind of a little bit of what, I don't want to start another conversation like that, because I think we did a very nice job of it. But it does talk about this in the code of ethics portion of it. It's remembering your responsibility is to set policy, not to implement the policy. We implement the policy, and that's what we need to improve on. Policy, there's a policy that's created, making sure that policy is implemented is our job, and that's where I need to do a better job of. Work through that superintendent to make sure that is done, and that'll be Dr. Wagner in the future. So this is just really your job as the board and how you fulfill your obligations to the community. That would be 209. Any questions on 209?
I got a couple.
Okay.
You heard me earlier state about the school board, the governing body of the school, of the district. I don't see anything, I don't know if this is the right spot for it, but I don't see anything as purpose of to assist individual school board understanding his or her role as part of a school board. So maybe we need to put that in there, because really, I don't know anywhere where it says school board is actually in charge of everything. Through the obviously we work through the superintendent, but ultimately the public elects us to oversee the operation of the school district. Because that's how it happens. The other thing in here I don't see is big up, and we have to be concerned about the financial part. We're financially responsible. I don't see anything in there about that.
Well, finance?
Yeah, as a board member.
Okay.
In performing your functions as a school board member, I will. Doesn't say anything about being fiscally responsible for the dollars, because you don't want to be in statutory debt. And that has happened to school districts in the state of Minnesota.
Okay.
It's not good.
That's really
Yes.
It does. I did a little research on this before I ran for school board, so I knew what I was getting myself into. And it does say in statute that we are a governing board and what our responsibilities are. And then if you go down to letter F, it says we comply with all federal, state, and local laws relating to my work as a school board member.
Right.
Because it also includes in that our fiscal responsibilities, and it even says in statute what training we need to go to through MSBA in order to be prepared to govern and oversee the fiscal aspects of financial responsibility of running a school district.
I understand. I
So,
understand
yeah,
the statutes
yeah,
up there.
yeah, so I mean, it's somewhere.
We
you have
need to
to
probably
look at
have
it.
something in there.
There is a policy.
201.
I was
201?
gonna say 101 also, legal
Okay.
status of the school district, it describes
101 or 201?
both have that
Okay.
information.
All right,
101
I'll-
is legal status of the district, and 201 is legal status of the school board.
All right, I'll look at those up. So, is that when you want to say anything more?
Yep, that was it.
You want to say anything more?
Okay.
Can I just make a statement, please?
Please, go ahead.
Okay, given a lot of the, rules, laws, and everything has not changed since education has been created. And in number A, as member of the school board, I will, number 5, support the decisions of the school board, even if my position concerning the issue is different. And although I do agree, but when it comes to talking about my people, and I'm not gonna follow that. You know what I'm saying? So as this board, I trust our board, and I see that and I understand that for future, but there's certain things that I do support that, but there are things that I will not, and which is my race. So if anything comes up about American Indian and things like that, and if things we didn't see eye to eye, I'm not gonna support somebody on things like that. So that's my only problem with that statement. When it had, just because things haven't changed, a lot of things haven't changed since I've been here. And my dad, and my grandma, and so I just wanted to make that statement. I do agree with it to a certain extent.
Any other things on 209?
Go ahead.
Okay, so 210 is conflict of interest. That deals with anyone on the school board that may want to sell or purchase property, or they run a separate business, and that business joins with this district, and a sale might happen inside there, and that's just talking about that. So you'd have to recuse yourself basically from any voting that would happen within there, or not even engage in that particular sale. It also talks a little bit about your time as a school board member. If you're employed by the district, there's a certain dollar amount that you can earn within that. Any question on 210, conflict of interest? 210-1 is just if we're a charter school board. Doesn't necessarily pertain.
I do have a quick
Yeah, go ahead.
question. With 210 and the amount of money that a school board member can make, there was a change in that, right? Did it go up? Yes, there was. Is that reflected in this policy?
Is it at state level or?
I think it's higher now.
Yeah,
It increased.
it increased, but I don't know what that number is.
Other than what we decided, what was it, a year or two ago, or 2, 3?
I think it's state, it's at the state level, it's not the district, it's not what we're paid as a school board member for being on the school board, it's if I substitute teach, there's a certain amount that I can make, and then it's a conflict of interest. So there's a set number,
That was
I do believe it
20,000. I
changed.
thought it was 20,000.
Yeah, I think in September, it says September 6th was when we last revised it. And I think that was that change, that it went to
Okay.
20,000. It was low.
It was like
used to be
8.
that.
I used to
Yeah.
be like 8, yeah.
8 or 12.
Okay, so that changes in here.
Yeah.
Okay. I was kind of glancing through it.
One for teachers, the role for TRA to be retired and substitute, which I don't do. But that dollar amount, I don't think there is a limit anymore because we are so short of teachers or subs, or it's very high. So that we can get qualified teachers in the classrooms to sub, so, but I don't think that's the same as this, so,
That's a little bit different.
yeah.
Lisa said it's in 210C something, so
Thank you.
I can't spell you. The print is so small.
She's looking at, right at the number.
All right, any other questions on this?
So I have, sure.
We're going to policy 606, textbooks and instructional materials. Tina Wagner and Director of Teaching and Learning.
And I'll bring up Meg Hammer too.
Hello, Meg Hammer. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hanging in there.
So while I know you love the 200s policies, one thing that I threw out to the Personnel and Agenda Committee was for us to take a peek at 606. Meg's been working this year on really streamlining all of the processes for our instructional media centers. And one thing that kind of speaks to our last conversation about being transparent with our constituent groups, our taxpayers, our parents, is the type of instructional materials we are vetting and selecting and the type of textbooks that are going into our libraries, as well as how do we weed information out or textbooks out and curriculum out as they become outdated or irrelevant or maybe as not as culturally responsive as we would like. So one thing that we are proposing, which many districts have, is a form that those parents or community members who have concern about curriculum, textbooks, media center selections for their children can actually fill out prior to anything else happening. And so then we would have a committee that would review the complaint or the concern and then vet out and go through our processes that we have in place to ensure that we can be responsive to that concern of the citizen who would fill out the form. So you have the form in your board materials. I'll let Meg talk a little bit about maybe the weeding component of it or anything else, and then open it up for a conversation about the process. But like I said, most districts do have a Form 606, which is the first step. So as a complaint or concern comes to you as a board member, you can certainly send them to Form 606 to start the process for our team to be able, our teaching and learning team to be able to look at the concerns and be responsive. This is happening informally in the district, so a parent may send an email or make a phone call directly to the teachers. What we want to do is bring it back to the policy level and procedural level to be responsive in a way that we can, globally look at the concern and be up to speed with that.
So every library needs to have materials taken out that are irrelevant or in bad shape. And so we've been slowly going through, COVID helped a little bit. We were able to get through some of it, but we'll have a cycle of when we're going through like the fiction in one selection or all the biographies. And it'll be by month, and then in your packets, there's just things that we look at where we have to make sure it's still part of the curriculum, or that the kids are really about the materials, that it's something the teachers might use to support. Might not necessarily be in the curriculum, but it might be something that the teachers are really passionate about that they want to share with the kids. They're also, our high school library is part of the Selco library system, like our Red Wing Public Library. So when I look at that library, I take into consideration what's available in southeast Minnesota, so that we're not spending money we don't unnecessarily need. And then our elementary and middle school libraries have a hold system so that we can share books between the 3 sites. Now, there's a little bit of an issue with that when you've got a kindergartner wanting something from the middle school. So the assistants will sort of vet that, so we're not getting the wrong types of materials there, but we're able to use what we have better. And now that we've got a lot of curriculum being stored in the libraries, we need more room. And so there's that need to weed too, just so that we don't have a lot of unnecessary things.
It's awesome.
I was just curious when this form, the date on it was March, right? Did we have a form like this before, or this is its first
No,
iteration?
I developed it. I looked at Fairfax County in Virginia, sort of a flagship for school libraries. And they let us borrow a lot of their words. And then Charlie McLaughlin and I worked on the form, and then we brought it to the teaching and learning team and looked through the form before we brought it here. But I did have a parent concerned about a book, and it was a book that I had missed in weeding, and I was very thankful that the parent had brought it to our attention. And so it was a no-brainer. It wasn't anything that needed to go to a higher level. It was something that should have been gone. So having a form like this, though, just sort of gives a more processed way of doing it.
Good. Good. We like it.
Yeah, thank you.
And is this form gonna be online, or?
I think we can have it linked. We have
Yeah.
other forms.
Yeah, and it can be live inputted, so they could type it out if they wanted to, or handwritten. And
Ultimately, then the form would come to the teaching and learning, the director of teaching and learning, we vet it through our teaching and learning team, and then we would give a response. So action from the board is if you would have a public comment or some type of a concern, the best next action is to request if they've completed a 606 form. I've had lived experience with this from my previous district, and this has helped just kind of streamline things to be responsive to the concerns that we see, and also gives transparency to our community members about the types of curriculum we're selecting. It's not limited to just media or the library
Right.
text. It could also be questioning the curriculum we're selecting, or novel studies that we're doing, whatever it might be. So it's not limited just to maybe what's being displayed in the library. So.
Very good. I think it's a good process.
thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on that?
No.
Okay. Well, it's 6:14. We'll take about a 6-minute break, and then we will go right into a regular school board meeting. All right, so motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Rowe, is there a second? Second by the red hand on the right over here, Ms. Bjornsted. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll come back in about 6 minutes.
Mute the owl.
Yeah, mute the owl, please. While we're We have everybody, all board members present, along with interim superintendent Frank Norton. Well, we've already done the pledge of allegiance. And we'll have Ms. Ossendorf read our mission statement, please.
The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens.
Thank you. You have the meeting agenda in front of you. Are there any additions or corrections? Deleting any, adding any? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Schoenfelder, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Tipp.
Pick one.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. The educational plan is before you, every meeting, we have it, we go by that, it hangs up on our tripod right there in every board meeting. And then we have recognitions and upcoming events. We have a number of things coming up before our next meeting, it's June 5th. So we have a number of things coming up, so who would like to start?
I can share a couple of things.
Sure.
I know that there's a wonderful committee that's putting together a party for the seniors following graduation on that Friday evening, June 2nd. We need more students to sign up, and so get the word out that they're looking to get more students coming. I think the number will keep raising as we get closer to that day, but, and of course, June 2nd is graduation. I think we all received emails, hopefully, from Mr. Nemenich on the procedure that evening, so that's really exciting. Great night. Hopefully, we'll be outside at 7 p.m. And then there's a number of graduation ceremonies that are also coming up that are really excited. The Hispanic graduation is in the Little Theater on the 24th of May at 11:30. And we were just informed about the Native American graduation feather ceremony. It's also on the 24th from 5 to 6:30. And that's a really busy day because there's a senior activities breakfast and recognition that morning, and then a senior award ceremony at Hubda Hall, 7 p.m. that night. So the 24th is a really big day, full of fun graduation things and senior recognition, so that's really exciting.
Anybody else have anything? Go ahead.
The GCED graduation ceremony is at 1:30 on the 25th. I believe it's 1:30.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
Anybody else have
That's
anything?
it.
Just-
River Bluff.
There's,
Ms. Ossendorf?
a play at the high school, May 18th, 19th, and 20th at 7 p.m. Alibis.
And I'm guessing there's must be band and choir concerts coming up this month too, usually the end of the year. I don't have those dates. Anybody?
Oh, there's a fantastic 6th and 7th grade band
Perfect.
concert
When's that?
here tomorrow night at 7.
Great.
It's about an hour, so it's perfect.
We should get those, and I've probably said it before, get them to Ann Robertson so she can put them in the weekly newsletter well in advance so people that wish to, because there are people, community members that like to go to the band and choir concerts and see the tremendous job that the kids put out.
And there are a couple more in that weekly newsletter, like the Jazz in the Park. I think Jazz Lab Innovation looks like we'll be at that, that's the Wednesday. And then 8th grade choir and band next Monday.
All right, let me check see what else we got.
If you haven't done
Lots of
that
things.
jazz in the park or the music in the park that our students do, it's phenomenal. Absolutely great. Hopefully it'll be a nice night. Bring your lawn chairs,
Is it
bring a little
Central
snack.
Is that band show?
Oh, band show.
Oh, I can just
Central Park.
walk right down there, maybe
Yes.
just sit on my roof.
Yeah.
Just walk from a distance, I can hear it.
Anybody else have anything? Go ahead. Mr. Moore.
Just came out today, that the retiree, and the 25-year employee celebration is now scheduled. So just to honor those people from 5 to 7 p.m., the staff will be gathering out at the barn at the Anderson Center. An opportunity to get out to the Anderson Center again. on Wednesday, May 31st. And also later on, underneath the fundraising portion of our schedule is the Winger Run 2023. So our runners within the board, with your running shoes on, that's on Sunday, May 21st, coming up. That's gonna be a 5K, walk or run, or jog. So you can do any of those, walk, run, whatever it is. It's just a fun way to get together, and it benefits the Hope Coalition, which works with our schools.
So when is that? I'm sorry.
That's on May 21st, Sunday at 2:00. You can be there in spirit, just cheering them on.
I will be there in
All
spirit.
right.
You can run in the morning if you want.
Oh, yes, I will get it done first, because I gotta go to Minneapolis that day.
You have anything else?
That's all I have.
We got a notice, I think, from Mr. Unwin, about the mail presentation on the 18th at 2 p.m. So we got that. And that's down in the mail cafeteria.
Yep.
And there's a bunch of presenters there talking about it. I have a list of that. That's from, I have 2 to 4, is that correct? At the time? Okay. Anybody else have anything else? That's a
We have
lot.
our memorial powwow on the 27th and 28th, it's free to the public. It's
Where's
a
it at?
traditional powwow at the powwow grounds down in Brandon.
Is there a time frame? Time starts?
I think in, one for, grand entry, but it's open up for vendors and food, so you can walk around, so.
27th and 28th?
Mhm.
A lot going on, and then we have graduation, like was stated earlier, on the 2nd. Let's hope, or cross your fingers, your eyes, your toes, and everything, that it's outside, because it gets plenty warm in that gymnasium otherwise. Anything else? A lot. All right.
Oh, one more
Well,
thing,
sure.
Izzy Goman had some awesome art down at the depot.
Yes.
So
Oh, yeah,
congrats to
yeah.
Izzy,
Yeah.
fabulous work.
It's there for the next month, so if anyone wants to see it.
So when?
I think June 15th.
Okay.
It's already
Beautiful.
Great. Any public comment? Did you get anything, Mr. Norton? I did not. Anybody in the audience wish to have any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to Inflex update. Ms. Wagner?
So I don't have a slide, but you have the handout in your board book. So I am pleased to announce that we are on track. I was in Miss Kristen Bray's art class today to get some feedback from our art students, as well as tomorrow we'll be working with our high school staff to get feedback on the new Maxim. So essentially what you all went through, we have now traveled through the community. We've had 2 listening sessions. We've had our leadership trained, and so have had every single school either include their voices of their students or their teachers and support professionals to give input onto the Maxim. And so we are submitting after tomorrow the last of the survey results that were also sent out after we meet with the high school staff. And so what next steps are is I will be working with Matt Coleman and the Inflection team. They will be creating their Maxim, which I think you guys all remember is a pithy statement, which is a short, sweet, concise way of just showcasing who we are and what our identity is. That's only one part of our strategic plan. It's the beginning part. This summer, the leadership team will be coming together to start the heavy lifting of creating the new strategic plan. So strategizing our instruction, our communication, our purpose, really thinking through the lily pad components, which is that bottom portion of that flyer, that will ultimately, after next school year, replace our current 5-year plan. So we'll have a strategic plan and direction. The other outcome to this work will be that each of our schools will have school improvement plans that align to the work as well. So a little bit more intimately tied to each individual school, but also, you know, fully aligning to the district vision and mission that we are creating. So next year will be very fruitful in really redesigning next generation Red Wing. Right now, it's just that shared identity and shared vision for readiness. And now we're gonna fill in all of the middle components. So lots of work will start in June. So we're already thinking about next school year.
Any questions? Okay, since you're sitting right there, you're still into your administrative Positions update?
So updates for interviews, we have on the consent agenda, we have a new Director of Teaching and Learning / Assistant Soup, ready to join us in July. We also have a new high school principal who has accepted the position, ready to join us in July. And this week are the interviews for the new Director of Finance. So we'll see where that goes. But in terms of all of these positions, we're filling them with great candidates, I believe, that will bring a whole nother level of expertise and skill set to the district that I'm pretty pleased with. So I had 2 great interview teams of roughly 17 people represented from all different positions in the district, walks of life, cultures, went through a very intense interview process with me. I kept them very sequestered for entire days, but we had our nutrition services take good care of us by feeding us and going through an entire process. We were meeting some we had excellent candidates for both positions. So we couldn't have gone wrong with any of them, but we picked the best of the best. And it was because we had the right voices at the table. We also enlisted the listening sessions and the feedback from the surveys that were sent out specifically for the high school principal. And then I think I mentioned at the last board meeting, we had a remarkable student panel who interviewed the up and coming high school principal, and they were the highlight of the entire process. So I'm pretty proud of our students.
There's a tour too.
Yeah, and they gave student tours. They created their own questions with the help of Nick Wendland and Emily Seafelt. They had better questions than the adult team. So I might contract with them next time I need some good questions. And yeah, so we're excited. So that's all I have for now in terms of executive leadership position.
Can you tell us
I know.
about Director of Teaching and Learning?
Yeah, I don't think I can say names, can I?
They're on the consent agenda.
Yeah,
It's public
so
information.
Allegra Schmizik is coming from Hopkins Public Schools. She is the Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning. Their department is actually called Innovation and Learning Design, something to that extent. Don't quote me exactly, but has a lot of experience with curriculum and instruction and innovation. A lot of energy for systems and procedures, which makes me very excited. And she was with us last Friday, so we were looking at a new infrastructure for our behavioral system at the high school, and so I invited her in so she could be at the forefront of the work that we'll be doing. So excited about her. She is currently a board member for Richfield Public Schools. That her term is almost up, so she loves board members. So that's good.
Who doesn't?
Right.
Who doesn't love?
I think she will fit well into the current teaching and learning team, and that was important for me. Our high school principal, Joshua Fuchs, is coming from Brooklyn Center Public Schools. He was also a high school principal in Richfield as well as Oakland, California. Has a commitment to culture and nature, and is ready for next level Red Wing Public Schools. We had also a dynamic group of high school principal candidates. So we had narrowed down to 2 really strong candidates and kind of went through the vetting process. And we couldn't have gone wrong with either of the 2 candidates. I wish we could have hired 2. We would have been awesome. We're awesome already, but so I'm excited for him to come in, and he's excited. He chose Red Wing over 2 other Twin Cities high school principal position offers, and had some candid and courageous conversations with me and accepted our position after that. So
Good.
Yeah.
Exciting times.
Director of Finance, I have nothing for you yet. We're hoping for somebody strong, so that's this week.
All right, any questions? No, that's a good question, Mr. The name, tell us a little bit about it. Glad you did. And they all start July 1st, according to the consent agenda.
That's a Saturday, but yeah, I'll have them on Monday.
Thank you for all the work that it takes.
That's a lot. All right, we're going to school board reports. Do we have any meetings? I didn't either. Okay. Got one next Monday.
We had APAC. Oh, yeah, we did have APAC.
Wait a minute, we didn't have one either.
No, we did. We
Okay,
had
go
it
ahead.
in person at the Clayton Creative Center. We just, Phil's still working on, with Rise Up, was it? To get a teepee at the high school and a teepee at the middle school. Was there a drum included or just the TVs?
I should have taken notes, I cannot remember. I didn't think so.
I took notes. Why did you read them?
Yeah, wait, all right, let me.
Okay. June, oh, we talked about the PTA, PTO.
Yeah.
That's gonna be June 12th. June 12th,
The youth impact meeting.
for PTA, PTO Youth Impact Meeting.
Can you just give those acronyms, what they mean?
Parent Teacher Association or Parent Teacher Organization. We're gonna, I think then they're gonna figure out what they want to be labeled or called. Yeah, maybe you know a little bit more.
Yeah, at that meeting, the youth network is a group of nonprofits, churches, people who work with youth in our community. And at that, one of the things that we've been working on in the youth network is determining whether or not we would like to have a help start a PTO or a PTA. So at that particular meeting, we're going to talk about just next steps in that.
And then, we have we have the Native American graduation ceremony, and then Prairie Island has their, one, it's the Wednesday before powwow, the July powwow. So it's July 5th, and, we talked about it in there about to see if school board was gonna be invited to that one, and they had said, so just keep on your emails this summer to see when those invitations come out. So, we talked about the graduation ceremonies, and then, NASA is putting together activities for Twin Bluff and Burnside, May 16th. So they're gonna go to the school, because that's what the elementary and the middle school, students and, the parents from APAC have been because we do so many wonderful, awesome things up at the high school. They want to start, including middle school and elementary, and they want to, utilize that NASA group, the older students, because they've been going to read to them and stuff like that. It's hard, they want to maybe see if they can get Sunnyside to walk, or,
Well,
the
they're
transportation.
talking about how to get the Sunnyside and
To Twin Bluff.
Burnside kids together.
No, I thought they had talked about getting Sunnyside to walk to Twin Bluff and get them to go there so they could participate there. Because we were thinking, well, once you keep Burnside and Sunnyside together, and so we were confused on the whole transportation thing, but then once he said they could just have Sunnyside walk to Twin Bluff. So that's May 16th is the activity, so that's all I got for APAC, I think.
And also they're working on getting a website and a link for APAC actually on the district website, because they need to have one. And Tony Kashi is helping with that, and the officers will be working on that this summer.
Yes, and then the rest of us we won't meet, but the core will meet and continue things like that, so.
Any other meetings? Thank you. All right, administrative reports.
So I've got a few things that, going back to graduation again, I just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with where they need to be. Got the invitation from George. I'm assuming everyone has responded back. They will be there or they won't. So we gather in the back at 6:15, but the gowns that you'll be wearing are actually in the front office. So you'll gather at the front office, or you just come to the front office like at 10 after or 5 after to try on your gown. You'll mess it up like I did last year. You'll have to, this will be over here, and you'll kind of fit it, and they'll make sure that it all looks nice, and then you'll head down. The way that you get down there is just go to the far end of the music down by the district office and go downstairs and out the lower level on that end. So if you were down by the weight room, circle around and go up that way toward the track. There's a large gathering space down inside there. The sidewalk is a U. The kids will all be lined up. All the seniors will be lined up, and then you'll form at the very beginning of that line. And we'll place you where you need to be basically. And then at 7 o'clock, the procession will begin and you'll march out to the field. You'll be led out to the field. The stand will, if it takes place out on the football field, the stage will be out in the middle. Parents will be gathered in the bleachers and the seniors will be gathered in chairs right in front of you. This is a little bit of a change from last year, or perhaps it was, just in the last couple of years. The number of chairs that were on there last year, there was a lot of chairs up there last year. And one of the things that I'm proposing that we change, that I proposed to George, I'm gonna run it by you guys just so you're not surprised and you can give me input if you'd like, is that during the process when the kids, I keep calling them kids, because they are young adults, when they come across the stage, they'll shake hands with Jim, they'll receive their diploma. It won't be in there, it'll be just the packaging of the diploma. And then last year, they shook hands with all the board members and with all of the presenters and everybody along the way. What I would like to do is have the majority of the board members off at the bottom of those stairs, down there, lined up, so that the graduates can turn to their parents. And instead of shaking hands with you on stage, they would turn to the parents and walk off, look, Mom, Dad, I did it, kind of a thing, celebratory thing. And then as they come down the stairs, that would be the opportunity for you to be able to shake hands. When you're seated there, you'll be introduced, and then you'll stand at that particular time. So George will have it at the beginning of his speech and say, I'd like to welcome, and he'll welcome everyone here, parents, graduates, our board member, and then he will name each board member by name. When your name is read, you will stand, if you would, and wave to the people that are out there so they can recognize you as board members. And then you'll be seated in the next one we go on. That's kind of the plan for that whole thing. The speeches that will be given on there are selected by the students, as you know. So that person will be on the stage, plus the two people who call names will be on stage. They will be seated up there as well so that they can just come up, give the names, go back and sit down. Any questions on that? Is that okay, Peter?
Who is handing the diplomas out?
We have them stacked,
They'll
up
just
inside
grab
there.
one?
Yeah, and you guys can decide, that's sort of this conversation that we'll have. We can have that conversation because you can switch if you'd like to be able to do that. Jim will be up on the stage as the chair. And then you can kind of switch off. That's what they do when they're reading the names. They switch off so that they're not reading too many names all in a row. That might be a good chance to be able to switch. Would you like me to have that conversation with
Yes.
board members
I would
here?
like the R's, please.
What?
I would like when we get to the R's.
Okay.
I like the idea of having us
Yeah.
not all on stage and all switching and passing out. I think whoever wants to pass out, that's fine.
It did feel pretty
I don't
congested.
Yeah,
It was.
it was
Yeah,
very, and it gets busy with us not knowing who's gonna pass out next, and just felt a little chaotic the last couple of years, so I like that idea. But as long as, whoever wants to. So I'm good with that.
I'll switch out at 10.
Or is there a specific reason why you want to do that?
You like the
Maybe a
R's.
kid or two in the R's.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll
I'll
start with
P. Fill out the application, we'll see if it's approved.
So what I'll do is I'll just maybe send something out and say, would you like to? And then we'll, where would you like to, rather than solving that tonight?
Sure.
As to where you want to be. And then it'll just be in the program, so that you know exactly where you're ending and what name you're ending on. And then you just go, come on up, and then you would switch. There'll be a pause inside there, but that's okay.
Or we can maybe make our way up. Yeah.
Beforehand and stand behind, yes, yep, just so you know where you begin in the process, okay?
I'm just heartsick that I cannot be there because these students were my last students that I taught.
Oh, wow.
But I have family stuff going on and I just cannot be there, so congratulations. They were one of my favorite groups of kids and I love them all.
Okay, so then afterward, of course, stick around and then you can meet the parents, and the parents will go with their students into the school to pick up their actual diplomas following the ceremony. So there's a lot of time to be able to speak and talk with the graduates that are out there.
Well, the only difference is if it's inside, then we'll be down around on the backside of the gymnasium.
Correct.
Let's hope it's outside. It was a beautiful night last
It
year.
sure was. Yeah, it was great last time. We're hoping for the same. The fundraiser is the next one that I have in here. I alluded to it a little bit, the Winger Run that's coming up. Just wanted to make sure that all fundraisers come through you. This is a pretty significant one. So it is coming to you at this particular time with the Winger Run on May 21st. And that's at 2:00 to raise funds for the whole coalition. High school finals schedule. I've got the schedule. I know we discussed finals earlier, but I'll just go through the schedule so everyone's aware basically of what are happening in those last 3 days. So there's no surprises. The first day is May 30th, and that is actually minis of the classes. So first, second, third, and fourth hours, instead of the normal 52 minutes, those periods will run for 35 minutes. So 35, 35, 35 instead of 52 for each one of those, sort of wrapping up the year for the students with that particular class. I wanted to give the opportunity to be able to do that. Then there's lunch, then 5th, 6th, 7th period, and then the first final is on that day. So period 1, anybody that has a final on that day, they'll take it at the end of those minis on that particular day. The next day is all finals, so May 31st, 2nd period, 3rd period, 4th period, and 5th period, and lunch in between. Now, lunch on each of those 2 days is an hour long. It's going back to what used to be, so as to avoid surprises, basically, that is going back to what used to be an open campus event. So by open campus, I'm hoping everybody knows what that means. Doesn't mean that they can go wherever they want on campus. It means they're contained to the campus, but students now that leave to go to PSEO or whatever, they can leave during that particular time period. There was some confusion when we said open campus, and it was gonna interfere with graduation. They can go to the football field, they can go to the tennis courts. No, it's the lunchroom, it's outside like they normally would be on the courtyard outside, or they're able to leave campus during that particular time. So there's no confusion with that. June 1st is 6th and 7th period. So we've gone through first period on one day, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th on the next, 5th on the next day, and then on June 1st is 6th and 7th period. They'll eat lunch, and then those students who need to take makeup finals will be able to do that. Those students who are having conferences or grading, those kinds of things, they've organized it so that those students can say, everybody else is dismissed after that last final, after lunch. So they'll be able to eat, be able to make up what they want to be able to make up, and then leave for the day. Yes?
So the email that was sent out actually says that lunch periods will be open, meaning students may leave campus during this time and then return for their afternoon finals.
Correct. That's what it means.
But that's not the description, Dave, I don't think.
No, it sounded like you meant.
You said they can't leave the building or the grounds. I mean, they can go outside and they can stay at, but they just can't leave the grounds.
No, the opposite. Open campus means that they can, what I meant by that was that they can't wander around the grounds. They're either in the cafeteria, or they're outside, or they leave campus, or they go home. So that,
Well, I think that is not clear.
No, it wasn't.
It says students may leave campus during this time and then return for their afternoon finals. That makes it sound like they can go down to Randy's, get some food, and come back. They may leave campus during this time and then return for their
That's what they
afternoon
can
finals.
do. They
That's what
can
they
leave
can
and
do.
go
They-
read.
Well,
And that's what they're saying.
that's what I read into this sentence.
And that's what that's what's
that's what it is.
proposed, right?
Correct.
Right.
But
Might not
you
be
just
clear.
said they can't
I
leave
am.
school.
No, they can leave school. They just can't wander around the school grounds. If they're gonna stay at school, they have to be in the cafeteria or in their outside area where they usually eat. They can't go down to the football field or the tennis courts or wherever, but they could leave the whole school and go somewhere and eat.
Yeah.
Just be understood.
I'm trying, what is that put us in some kind of liability? And it's also, I'm concerned about equity. What about the kids who can't afford to leave, don't have a driver's license. And then you've got kids that might, without their parents' knowledge, because, you know, I was a teenager, so are my children. They're resourceful, they're gonna find somebody that will give them a ride, and now some kid I don't know is taking my 8th grader down to Randy's for lunch. I think we're kind of opening a horrible can of liability worms.
Well, my understanding would be reopening, because this is just what's been done. So I don't know that for a fact, but they're just going back to pre-COVID, when there were finals before this. So I could be wrong.
There's a reason why this isn't an open campus up here.
Yeah.
I was the first 10th grade, and so when you went to 9th grade and you were in open campus, you can go downtown, that was great, but they shut it off for a reason. And because we're responsible for these bodies, what if there was a car accident or something to happen in between? You know, there is a reason why you have to have, okay, so here's an example. I should have been on an IEP or 504 plan in 10th grade when Prairie Evan and my mom came here to get me out half days. I got out at 10:50. Now that wasn't the case. Now, if I was to get into a car accident and died, my mother could have sued the district because there was no 504 plan or IEP. And here's this unaccounted kid between times because we didn't follow our own laws and procedures. So that's my red flag I see. It would be fine to let them go and excuse them with parental, like, maybe I would have had to have my mom sign me a letter or something, you know, with parental consent. But to let them go off and then come back in, that is where I see the sticky situation.
Well, it's gonna put a lot of pressure on the office staff too, to sign all those kids back in and sign all those kids out. I'm really, really uncomfortable with this.
I'm also worried about, you know, who's gonna be monitoring outside in the parking lot? Because you say that they can't be in those places, well, who's gonna make sure that's happening?
They have that arranged.
Oh,
Yep. So we met and said who's gonna be where,
okay,
what's
so,
gonna be done here, who's gonna be monitoring that. If it's raining, who's gonna be in that little theater, who's gonna be in the gymnasium, who's gonna be, so all of those spaces basically were covered by that particular time period.
And then, so with lunch too, do kids, like usually there's a lunch schedule and they're controlling the number of kids that are going in and eating, and they're all going to go there at once. And I just think about my experience as a teacher in the middle school over lunch period, and also if we're gonna have kids be there for a field trip or not there, they plan for that with food quite a while in advance, and they wanna know as staff, hey, we're doing this, and all of our kids are gonna be gone this day, and maybe we'll have 10 bag lunches that will get purchased. But how are they gonna manage feeding all those kids in that time without having any time to recover, clean up, or reset, or whatever?
So I met with the kitchen staff, and the director of nutrition. They're gonna have that number of kids that will be eating in that cafeteria a week in advance. And then at that first day of the final, they're gonna, on the first class of the first day of that final, they'll say, raise your hand if you're gonna be eating lunch in the cafeteria, take another count and send that down on the day of, in case kids change their mind within that week's time period.
And then are they gonna stagger serving times? I'm just curious. I think it's a lot.
Ms. Schoenfelder.
I mean, I don't know the answer, like, are we liable if it's an open campus? I mean, we've had years of open campus, like, is the school liable for what kids do over their lunch hour on an open campus?
Not if it's arranged ahead of time, it's an open campus. If it's a closed campus and they leave because they're not supposed to leave, but with recognition or saying that it's open and advance notice to the parents that it is an open campus, that's my understanding, is that now you've been notified. If the parent wants to say, my child should not leave, then they can do that.
But if a parent does say my child shouldn't leave, who's monitoring that, like, as they leave? Because they're not signing out really when they leave, right? Or are they?
No, and we talked about that as well. We said there might be 8 kids. So on that last final, a reminder that you are not to leave the building, make sure that they're down there. I think the people down in the cafeteria would have a list of those students. And then we would notify, we talked about notifying the parent if we see that student leaving, or if you can't find them within the cafeteria. So we would say, do you see them? Do you see them? Where is everybody on this list? If we can't find them, let's call. And then that parent then would call their cell phone to find out where they are, or we were at least notified. So we did have that communication.
I think there's liability issues. I just think there's liability because something happens. I think Ms. Buck, or I think it was her that brought up that my child got into a vehicle I didn't know, and something happened. It broke down. They went off and did something they shouldn't be doing. They had, heaven forbid, a bad accident or a car crash. What's going on? Why did you let them out? So I think it's a liability issue that we have to be prepared for, or not allow.
I can check again with the attorney, but my understanding was that parents are notified that they're gonna be leaving campus. They have the option of staying or having their students stay. And once you've notified the parent that it's going to be an open campus, you can allow it. But I can check with him just to make sure what our risk factor is inside that.
Sure.
I get times change, and we should roll with the punches and change with the times. But I can't ever accept that just because we did it this way pre-pandemic, we should go back to doing that. Like, just because we did it before doesn't mean it was right then, or because we did it then, it's right now. Like, I think that's not a reason to go back to how it used to be. Like, that's not a reason to make a decision like that. I'm just gonna put that in the space and wow.
One of the other decisions basically to be able to do that is we have close to 120 students that come and go throughout the day now. So they go to PSEO, they go to the work study, they're in and out, and parents know that, but it's during the school day. They're constantly coming in and out of the building. So it's just a step basically in that particular direction of this, it is changing, times are changing. The kids are in, they're out, they're out, they're out. So just basically in that same direction, we've got about 120. We anticipate probably doubling that of the kids that might leave, but most will stay. They're just gonna be outside playing Frisbee. So
With those things, they're already, laws and procedures are already signed up for those particular things, so that covers them. That does not cover anybody else who doesn't have and decides to go out. I am not opposed in the future to maybe possibly looking at things like this, but children's safety is utmost important. And for me, when you've got a lot of students and you've got 4 to 6 to 8 wheels, however many buses carry, and you've got, it's just, to me, I just don't think that we need better structure and organization before we execute that, I think. I'm not saying that I'm not, but I just don't think there's enough meat behind this and planning and to let them off and then come back on.
I'm also having some feelings of empathy for a new principal coming in, who now, we did this year. Now this new principal comes in and maybe is not comfortable with this or hasn't had a say in it at all. And we're kind of setting this person up to not have a good start if they don't like this or don't feel comfortable with it. I feel like, why can't we wait another year to, as Nikki said, really take a look at it and take some time and make sure we're doing it correctly.
This wasn't done quickly. This has been in the works for a very long period of time. I would just say that one of the things that we, as administration is we give people that say, be creative, this is what we want you to be able to do within a building sense. Do what you think is best for your building and go. And if this is going to work and they've got a plan together, at this particular time and they've vetted it, it's been, communication, we asked them to communicate. Dr. Wagner said, let's slow down, let's look at this, let's talk about this. Everybody came to the table to be able to have conversations about it and added things into it as it went along. So we really haven't gotten anything back. I haven't gotten anything back from parents that's saying that this is an issue for what's going on. So from my perspective, basically, we hired them to do their job, to put finals together. Our DAC coordinator put the testing schedule together, created it, went through the people that were in there. In my opinion, basically, this is the direction that we go, but if the board, you're not comfortable with it, I don't know what else to say. It's gone out to the parents, so.
Well, I think one other thing you have to keep in perspective is that, we have done this before. And I think, for example, my daughter and her friends, they know that this has happened. So if it isn't an open campus, you're gonna have parents then who are asked to just call their kids out so they can leave the campus for that hour to go do whatever. So I think you're gonna have to be prepared for that situation as well as people calling in to let their children leave campus to come back to campus for essentially an open campus.
One of the things also you have to remember is if they don't have a final, they're not in school. So there will be people coming and going all day long and there won't be any way to manage that. That's the reason for it. So if they don't have a fourth hour final or a third hour final, they will leave third hour and they'll be gone during that lunch hour.
Right, but
So-
they'll sign out, right, before they go, they won't just walk out the door. So we'll know they're leaving from their third period class.
Right, but they're still leaving campus is what I'm saying.
Right.
So I appreciate that because these final 3 days aren't like ordinary days. Kids are coming and going constantly, all day long, in, out, and to be able to say, no, you have to be here, their parents are gonna call them in and say they're leaving, and they'll leave regardless. So it just facilitates basically the final schedule.
I feel comfortable having a parent call in, because at least they know where their kid's gonna be then. And it's excused, it's no different than how we run school.
Well, I think he brought up the point, I think we need something written from our attorney, our liability issue. Secondly, I think communicating with the parents, even more communication such as understand that some kids that drive may get pressured to take somebody with them and understand the liability risk if something happens during that time, because if something does happen, we may be liable, but the driver of that, or owner of that vehicle will be ultimately responsible if there's an accident, something like that. And so parents, we all were teenagers. I know what I did when we had the old high school down in open campus. It's fun, but risky too. And we want to make sure our kids, like you said, are mostly safe every day, that they're either in school or out of school. But I think getting something from our attorney, communicate with the parents again, saying, understand that this open campus means kids can leave and other kids may get on there that other parents don't know. So we really would hope you have a conversation with your child about leaving school and the risks and consequences. Yes.
So a voice message is going out as well, asking them to contact with concerns. So it'll be a message and Jamie's gonna translate it so that everybody's aware. And during that particular time period, Chair, we could put that portion in. Please advise your student that they are not to be riding with others. Something like that.
Or give a ride.
Or give a ride. I know I'd tell my kid that.
But,
okay.
But, we're trying to do everything we can, but if the attorney says we have great risk, then we have to squash it then.
I'll come back to you. So the last one I have on here is an update on the ALC.
Okay.
The staff members that were removed from the ALC, for lack of a better term right now, are back in. So the social studies teacher that was cut from the ALC, that social studies teacher is now back. The transition coordinator position that was 0.6 out there and 0.4 DAPE. That individual, 0.4 DAPE by physical education, that individual has chosen to go back into that as well. He had an opportunity to go into regular education, he went back to the ALC. So both of those positions are back in place. The last position basically we're working on is the tutor position. I just wanted to give you an update that that structure that you were looking for is going right back to where it was, okay? The other portion that we did is we met out there regarding the safety portion of it. I've been in contact with our safety director within. I'd like him to go out there and take a look. I've been in contact with our director of technology. He's already been out there and taken a look at the structure, and they're waiting basically for us to give them direction as to where we want to go. They've got a preliminary bid as to how much cameras, surveillance equipment would be necessary. Not necessary, but would be ultimate out there. We're gonna kind of phase our way into that as the budget calls for. The other thing that they're talking about is restructuring the layout out there so that the front door is monitored for certain days of the week, and the entrance for the kids comes through the principal's office as opposed to one of the other areas within the building that the kids can come in now. So well underway, not complete by any means. We also walked through and talked about the actual facility itself and the upgrades that they're going to be making to the facility itself, including carpet and the ventilation systems. And those will be taking place during June.
And there's that one position you talked about, that tutor group.
Yeah.
That is a GCED position or learning
They,
exclusively?
they buy it from us. And as to whether they want to buy that position from us again is the issue. That's where they are right now.
Any questions?
Teachers are under,
Go ahead.
teachers were under contract in our contract, and they need to stay under our contract. They don't have a contract, the third person we're talking about isn't under a contract and was released. So that's a different situation.
Okay.
That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. Consent agenda. You have before you, some of the names were written off by Dr. Wagner. Looking forward to those starting. Is there anybody have anything they wish to pull from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Ms. Ossendorf moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by who? Ms. Schoenfelder. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have donations and grants. And Mr. Norton.
Yes. We have a few, just three, but they're big. So Oksana and Sean Chaska of S&O Discount donated girls' clothing, makeup, and toiletries for the Red Wing High School students. It was materials as opposed to dollar amount. Phillips S. Duff Jr. Endowment Fund donated $10,000 to initiate the Inquiry Journeys curriculum at Red Wing Public Schools elementary schools. And Michael and Nancy Murphy donated $500 to the Angel Fund. Those are the three.
Mr. Murphy was here last week, or 2 weeks ago. So, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Schoenfelder. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Bjornsted. This is a roll call vote. We want to thank everybody for their wonderful donations. We'll start with Ms. Schoenfelder.
Aye.
Ms. Buck.
Aye.
Ms. Ossendorf.
Aye.
Ms. Rowe.
Aye.
Ms. Tiff.
Aye.
Ms. Bjornsted.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr. Norton. Policies 200.
We'll jump back into the policies again. These are actually just one reading because again, the minor changes, dates, last reviewed, changing some of the wording basically, but it doesn't change the policy. So 204 establishes procedures relating to the maintenance of records of the school board and publication So it's our meeting minutes, the recording that's going on right now, where is that stored, how is that stored? The clerk responsible for that. So Director Tip jumping up and making sure our recording is going. And then the publication of official proceedings, publicizing that out to the community. So that's just, what anybody have any questions on 204? Very self-explanatory in that particular one. 205 is the open meetings and closed meetings, the definitions of them. Basically, this is more definition driven as to what meetings are. There are a number of different meetings, and we've had a couple of them this year. So we've had closed meetings, open meetings. This year, we're gonna be coming into where there's gonna be, you'll have meetings where you'll be meeting, there'll be, I'm looking for where retreats, meetings where you will gather, those kinds of things. So it's, those are the kinds of things that are listed within here. Any questions on the open meeting versus closed meetings? The definition of all the meetings that you can have. But you didn't think there were that many meetings. Okay. The last one, pardon me, 206. Public and participation in school board meetings, complaints about persons at school board meetings and data privacy considerations. So this one really you would think would be more along the lines of participation in the public, so our open comment section. But it also really talks about what can and cannot be discussed. Personnel data, that's why I didn't mention any. I'll give the ALC example. I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about positions within here. Personnel data that's open to the public and is not open to the public is described inside here. Rights of privacy to the people that you employ, and the procedures within the agenda item to talk about those people. People that wish to address the school board, contact the chair, or they contact me prior to, and then the chair goes through the definitions, or gives a definition of what it is that you can and cannot say, making sure that people are aware of what they can say during that time period. They can't name names and they can't complain about people. Okay? Any questions on that one? I guess there is one more. 207, public hearings. School board recognized the importance of public hearings. In my time here in Red Wing, I haven't had a public hearing. Basically, that just opens it up instead of public comment, which was in the previous policy. This is a policy on public hearings. So you might want to discuss, for example, school closings, that kind of thing. So you'd have a public hearing and people could come and express, and the public could express their thoughts on that. So that's a public hearing policy and how that would operate. Any questions on 207? So because of the minor changes, really, I'm just looking for approval of those.
Yes.
No, I yawned, sorry.
Is there a motion to approve the policies as presented?
Yes, I will move to approve policies 204, 205, and 206, 206 and 207 as presented.
Ms. Ossendorf makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Tiff beat you this time. Ms. Rowe, excuse me. I was looking over here. I was waiting for Ms. Tiff.
Wanted you to jump.
All right. My mistake. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Upcoming meetings and future topics. I'm gonna throw something out here. I'd like to schedule a retreat with our new superintendent and probably whoever else that she thinks will be necessary to attend a board retreat for some part of a day, starting the dates I'm looking are the weeks of June 10th, 17th, and 20th, back up. Dates of July 10th, 17th, or 24th, any day between those days. I'm just looking at some type of retreat that would would be available, that we could sit down and just talk about things and going forward as we have a new team coming on board. I think it's good to get acclimated and all that as a board and with our new superintendent too. So I'm not asking tonight, please jot down some times and we'll discuss it at our next school board meeting on the 5th of June. So let's just say you decide you have to decide this week, the week of the 10th, this day works, the week of the 17th, this day works, the week of the 24th, this day works. And we'll come up with a time that works for us.
I ask a clarifying question.
Yeah.
By retreat, how long of a time? Like,
3-4 hours, something like that. I'm not gonna get you there all day.
okay.
Could be a morning, probably a morning would be better. And, yeah, I would just to go over things and just get us, see where we're at. It might take only 2 hours, but it doesn't hurt us to get together. It'll be a public meeting. We'll advertise it as such. We'll find a place for it and all that. So, okay? Questions on that? Great question on the time. I was thinking 2.5 days, but I think I cut it back to 3.
Just to give any takers on that.
No, we wouldn't have nothing. No, so we'll shoot for 3 hours. How's that? Could be done before that, might be a hair over that, but so. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move by Ms. Ossendorf. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Buck. I didn't get it wrong this time, Jennifer. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We have an extra week off. We'll see everybody on June 2nd at least, or at any other one of the other graduations that we have coming this busy month of May. So have a great Memorial Day, everybody. And our next meeting is June 5th at 5 o'clock.
Martina, I have a request for next year.